So what is going on in our world that is causing all of this radical weather all over the entire world? Hopefully this document right here on the screen that the CIA declassified recently, plus some more evidence I'm going to show you, will help shed some light on that. At this point, I think most of us agree that it's not just because we use hairspray and drive pickup trucks. We're seeing the migration paths of birds and whales and everything being thrown off to the point that whales are beaching themselves trying to follow that electromagnetic migration path. And when they're rescued and taken back out to the ocean, they will turn around and beach themselves again, trying to go that same direction that they can't go anymore. And as always, the pole shift is not a conspiracy theory. Just look it up. Even the airports have to repaint their lines because of the change in the magnetic field right here. Airports worldwide have to change the numbers of their runways as magnetic north moves about 60 kilometers a year. So even the mainstream admits there is a pole shift. That's the definition of a pole shift. Magnetic north is shifting, and that's quite a bit, 60 kilometers a year. And I think it's more than that now. And we know the Schumann resonance is spiking. That's the actual frequency of the earth. Think about that. The frequency realm, the dimension that we live in, is suddenly going nuts. It started in about 2014. Before that, it always seemed to resonate around, what do they say, 7.83 hertz. And that's alpha brainwave frequency, which is associated with a state that's easily hypnotizable, associated with meditation and things like that. So it affects our brain function, which most of you know if you've watched my channel and any of my videos about the multiverse and how the different dimensions work and all of that, that it is all about frequency. And we can access other dimensions. In fact, we're accessing 5 dimensions with our 5 senses right now. 5 different frequency ranges that we're perceiving 5 different ways, not in totality, but we compile those with our brain to perceive what we call this world. And we say it's 3 dimensions, but it's actually probably closer to 5 dimensions that we are living in right now. So when the Schumann resonance changes and our brainwaves change, we are literally going to change worlds. When people talk about the rapture or being enraptured and all of these types of things, we need to take this seriously because this is happening in our lifetime. And there are a lot of people tracking that, but Mr. MBB333 on his website, he has an entire section devoted to tracking the Schumann resonance. And he's sort of my sky watcher. He's my go-to guy. I support his ministry, and that's where I get a lot of my Skywatch news. So I recommend you go and check out his videos. And Blue Kool-Aid, he's really on top of things too. But anyway, you can see just from the thumbnails on these graphs and the dates that these were posted that this has been ongoing. The last one here 2 weeks ago, we had a major event all the way back to 1 year. It was up to 40 hertz. 40 hertz from 7? This is no small deal. I mean, look, it's completely whiting out the graph. And it's just mind-boggling. Look at this. A few thousand people, 13,000, 28,000, a handful of people compared to the billions on Earth are even paying attention. The very frequency of our reality is changing, of our matter, the dimension we live in. This is monumental. This is of biblical proportion. But these changes, these electromagnetic changes and the Schumann resonance and all of that, they don't just affect the human body, they affect the earth as a whole. And from the looks of this declassified document that the CIA has been hiding since the 1960s, the shadow government has known this for a long time. They have known about the changes that the earth goes through on a cycle. They knew this was coming. That's why they launched all of the propaganda campaigns like global warming and all of that type of thing. They have to subdue the masses, give them an explanation so that people don't stop going to work and people don't stop paying their taxes. And in the meantime, they can milk it for all it's worth. They're building their underground bunkers and their dome homes, and they've plotted all of the safe zones. And to pay for all of that, they just wanted to implement even more taxes, carbon chits and all sorts of gas taxes and everything else, just to keep robbing us, to keep us poor and in the dark, while their families have been preparing for the crescendo of this cycle for decades and decades and decades. And I personally believe that they have the records. You know, the Vatican archives, they went around during the Crusades and gathered up all the records from every civilization on earth. So it's my contention that they've always known that this cyclical event happens and that they prepare for their families. Like the leftists, those of the left-hand path, always say, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So that's what they do. So when they resurface, then they are in control of the world again. This isn't the first New World Order. In fact, on pages 7 to 9 of this classified document, it talks about the ancient gods, right? They're telling us that it's all mythology, but at the same time, they found this text so dangerous that they classified it and made it secret all of these decades, because it says that this same type of cataclysm happened during Noah's era. Vishnu, Osiris, if it's all mythology, why would they have classified this document?
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
Never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact on climate change and energy security, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yes, so crisis is a chance, and thank you for your answer, and I may inform you and you that the European Parliament has finalized its legislation concerning climate change in December, and we were waiting for the new administration that we have the leadership together.
Periods of crisis are good because they sometimes lead to the opening up of possibilities for alternative discourses. To use this neoliberal discourse to push certain policies around the globe.
In a nutshell, Emmanuel described a philosophy advanced by one of the fathers of the Enlightenment, George Hegel. Students of Hegel labeled his three-part theory the Hegelian dialectic. Students of Karl Marx call it management by crisis, and it was adopted as a centerpiece of communism.
And that's what's happening in our world right now. There is a world crisis coming, and they know all about it. Not only do they know all about it, but they are actively covering it up. When I show you some of this science that they are using to cover this up, I mean, it's going to blow your mind. It's hard to even fathom that there could be something this size in our atmosphere and we wouldn't be able to see it. So that's why it's mind-blowing. So hang with me and at least just hear me out. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of people who watched those first few minutes of clips of all of the climate chaos going on all over the world have already probably left comments that, oh, it's weather modification and the government's doing this and geoengineering and that type of thing. And I don't discount that. This is not mutually exclusive, these two events. In fact, they are using this radical weather changes that the earth is going through as a camouflage for them to do these acts of war with weather war. There is absolutely no doubt that weather modification is going on. Not a conspiracy theory. I will put the links down below to CIA.gov and NSF.gov where you can access these documents yourself and see these aren't photoshopped. These are straight off the government websites, Special Commission on Weather Modification, and it will give you the names of the projects, the universities involved, the scientists involved, the directors, all of it. That doesn't change the fact that there are massive electromagnetic changes going on in the earth, and we're about to see massive volcanoes go active everywhere, massive earthquakes, and that is not all going to be from man. Man is not the measure of all things. There are celestial mechanics at play here, and there are celestial objects and celestial entities approaching. Now, this isn't a real picture. This is computer generated by Yeti Dynamics, so I'll put that link below. But I chose this picture because it reminds me of what God showed me in the vision. When I had prayed, I prayed and asked. I actually didn't ask at all about anything like this. I just asked what was coming, because my previous visions over the last 20 years, just a handful that I had, all seem to deal with war, and a couple with earthquakes and things like that. So I was asking God, what is coming? Is this really coming? And he gave me a vision of this, which a lot of people call the Planet X system, Nibiru, the destroyer, things like that. But anyway, I was shocked at the size of it. What I saw in my vision, it was like this. It was unbelievable. You would think, oh, if we're going to see another planet in the sky, or we're going to see this thing coming, that it's going to look like the moon, or it's going to look like a second sun. But no, it was as if it popped out of another dimension. It was instantly, quickly, this size on the horizon. And actually, in my vision, there was a second object, slightly smaller, that looked sort of like our moon. It was cratered and that sort of thing, but it was also enormous. And it obviously didn't instantly kill us, because in my vision, we were already gathered together as a family. And I kept going to the window to look out at it. It was just too much to take in. And I was telling my brother, I'm like, I tried to tell you about this 20 years ago and you wouldn't believe me. But look, it is here. And honestly, I do believe this has something to do with coming out of another dimension, as well as physically coming toward us in the atmosphere. And that might sound confusing or contradictory, but the last video I put up just a few days ago, I talked a lot about that, about matter and density and how the dimensions are overlaid and all of that type of thing. All those videos would be right here. Part 3, China's ghost cities, the underworld, ... I know it says ghost cities in the title, but I think it's, I don't know, around 45 minutes in or whatever. I go kind of in depth into this concept. Here's the 1159 video, the quantum leap rapture, the event horizon, falling stars. And in that one, I talk a lot about the atomic structure, how electrons are essentially the same thing as what we are calling these celestial bodies. And when they change dimensions, when they drop down in frequency, it changes the atomic structure. This is real and scientific, and that's the type of thing I discuss in that one. And then this one, the multiverse Mandela effect, glitches in the matrix. This one, I talk a lot about how these celestial objects are actually celestial beings, and how when they intersect our 3 dimensions or 5 dimensions, we are nowhere close to perceiving the totality of what we're looking at. We're only seeing the part that is intersecting our dimension. So there are a couple of deeper angles that I want to talk about as we discuss this thing, that it didn't just come flying in from outer space, from the shallow materialistic worldview that they've given us. But then I also want to show you the very down to earth, very 3-dimensional science and technology that these deep state players are using to mask this. So that's what I want to talk about today. How could something this big have been approaching for decades and we not be able to see it with our naked eye? Okay, so let's start with all of the unexpected solar eclipses. All around the world, there have been these mysteries for the last couple of years where the sun will just become eclipsed and it will go dark right in the middle of the day. So here's a recent one that most of you remember. It was July 20th of 2018. So a few months ago, 9 months ago, and that was in Russia, Siberia. And that was one of the clips that I included at the montage that kicked off this video. So out of nowhere, the sun is just eclipsed for 3 hours and day turns to night. Now, of course, they've scrubbed the internet. When I went to find the articles, there were a zillion when this first happened, but they have completely scrubbed the internet, and the only articles you can find are the mainstream cover stories. And yes, of course, we double checked all of the particulate maps to see if their sloppy propaganda checked out, and of course it did not. There were the dust storms and sandstorms that they were propagating during that whole time. So they were saying, you know, like they always do, talking out of both sides of their mouth, sloppy propaganda. They just say, oh yeah, it was just part of the dust storm. Their devices, all of the devices at the universities were saying, no, there were not particulate clouds in that area at all. But this phenomenon has been happening for a few years now. Here's one that I covered it happened in Stockholm, and it was about an hour after sunrise, and then all of a sudden the sun gets eclipsed by something and it goes dark again. I posted this video, let me see, this was October of 2017. This was the same exact time that the skies went red over London. And here's one from just a few days ago. This is March 29th. This is on several, like a dozen cameras in Germany. After sunrise, all of a sudden, the sun is eclipsed and it goes dark again. Now I'm going to play a little clip. This is from Jeff P's channel over at Nibiru Watchers. Since he already said it well, I'll just let him in his own words go over these different webcams here and let you know what was caught and how they systematically deleted several hours of footage. You can see right here the time, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning they deleted, 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock in the morning they deleted, and on all of these cameras simultaneously, which were all stationed in different locations. And it wasn't just like some sort of internet outage or whatever, because depending on the location of the camera, different hours would be deleted. And as always, I will put a link below to his channel down in the credit links in my description box, because this is how we network. If you follow the links that I leave, then you can go to these videos and they themselves will have links to all of their information and citations. So that's where you can get the links to these webcams in Germany that are live streaming. Except, of course, when they start to pick up these anomalies, like some enormous object eclipsing the sun in the middle of the day. And now again, I want to point out the size of the object we must be talking about, because I'm going to be throwing around the word solar eclipse quite a bit throughout this video. And we're not talking about the same type of solar eclipse that we see when the moon passes in front of the sun, because you know that transit happens very quickly. But we're talking about an object so large that when the sun passes behind it, it takes several hours to transit out the other side. Plus, we're talking about total darkness. And anybody who's ever lived through what we call a total solar eclipse from the moon knows that it doesn't get totally dark. Like this last total solar eclipse, the Great American Eclipse, here I live just above Carbondale, Illinois, which was the perfect path of totality for it. And it didn't get dark here at all. I mean, it blocked out the sun some, but there was a lot of sunlight still present. It didn't get pitch black like we're seeing from these unexpected eclipses. So whatever object the sun is passing behind for those hours is so enormous that it is blocking out all sunlight. So please do keep that in mind as we move forward.
This ought to drop your jaw. Now, this is web cameras in Germany. I will leave links to like 10, 15 of these in the description box, and you can investigate this yourself, because this is not Photoshop. Folks, it is March 29th, okay? Now, there's a lot of deleting and editing going on here. And see, every one of these cameras here are all doing the same thing. So, it's 10 a.m. in Europe. Where's the sun? There's 2017, March 28th. That's what the sun should be like at 10 o'clock in the morning. And yet, we go to 2019, we go to the 29th, and we have total darkness. Not only that, but something extra strange. I want to show you the editing, how they do this. Two things are happening, okay? So ever since the 29th, frame after frame, and then suddenly it's light out, okay? Now, well, another thing I want to point out is when you have your mouse over this website, you will see a thumbnail of the picture that it had that day. See here? But you can see that they're grayed out and it's no longer there. They only showed us the hours, and you see that there. It's even missing some of the minutes inside that hour on these as well. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, deleted, deleted, deleted. So what were they hiding? Is something wrong with the camera? Well, why is it happening to all the cameras in the same time? Here is yet another camera catching the same thing with missing time. Once again, you can see 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning missing, still showing the same hours. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, still dark outside. 9 o'clock, finally the sun comes up, right? And that's supposed to be normal. Look at, let's go back to 2018. This is how much light's supposed, 2017, 9 o'clock in the morning, it's supposed to look like this, not like this, okay? 8 o'clock in the morning, look at that, 18. See the difference? 2 different years apart. 2 different cameras. Let's go to yet a third camera.
And here's a video I did about 6 months ago that shows an object, 2 objects actually, eclipsing the sun. And the reason that the title line says observatory seized, town evacuated, FBI and black helicopters is because that was at the exact same time that the Sunspot Observatory was suddenly just seized and closed down. And there absolutely were Black Hawk helicopters and the FBI crawling all over. And here's another update, Sunspot Observatory reopens. So if you're interested in that, you can go watch those 2 videos, because the cover story came out after all of the craziness. Then all of a sudden they came out and started propagating that, well, there was a janitor who worked there who was using the computers for porn or something ridiculous. With all the guys everywhere using computers for porn, they send in Black Hawk helicopters and the FBI, and they close down a whole town and quarantine it. I mean, this is just ridiculous, but that's the cover story, and I show all of that in these 2 videos here. And around that same time, I was doing a series on all this type of stuff. So that's when the Is the Sun a Portal video went up, and also this one, What Are They Hiding? Anomalies in the Sun and Moon. And this talks about my experience of seeing 2 light sources where the sun was going down in the west, but yet in the north, there was a complete other light source shining over the horizon. So that video is interesting as well and pertains to this subject. Okay, so these are the images in question from the SDO imaging devices, which again, we're talking about, you know, September 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th is when this observatory thing is happening with the FBI. And these images are taken from 9, so you can see this is 9/7, and I'll show you some more of this activity through the 9th. So here it's going to come, you're going to see it's going to be really fast. Okay, so now I want to play a quick clip from Steve over at WSO. And he's compiled the screen captures from that day to show exactly what I'm talking about, and he talks about the data succinctly.
Check out what's going on SDO. Both 193 angstroms and 171 angstroms both saw an anomaly. Watch it now, really close. See, it goes that way, and then it comes back the other way. Let's just look at it on one here. Goes down and up. So that should not happen.
The next thing I'd like to show you are the Federal Aviation weather cameras in Alaska and Canada. Now, our sister who specializes in this, and I mean, she is called to do this, she is powerful at this, she keeps a close eye on these cameras. I believe this is one of her channels, Universal News Media. That used to be her main channel. But recently I've seen her coverage on the Final Days. So I believe both of these are her channels, and the Final Days is her new channel. But anyway, she does a fantastic job of showing that this object is in the sky. And it is so enormous that our sun goes behind it and is eclipsed. And that's where the sun simulator comes in. And I've done a few videos on the sun simulator. There's one in the Biggest Secret series right here. Biggest Secret, sun simulator, lights in the sky, 5G Wi-Fi to Li-Fi, LED light bulbs, and AI smart cities. So there's a lot that goes into the sun simulator, and it's not just a fake sun. There is a full array of objects, a network of objects. And some of them look like this. Some of them are for cloaking, and some of them are like I talk about the Li-Fi. We know that Li-Fi broadcasts internet, Wi-Fi, but it actually does it through light, like LED light bulbs. See, you can look it up. It's all in that video if you want to go back and watch it. But, you know, the crux of it is instead of Wi-Fi, that it'll be coming from these LED bulbs. So it sort of reminds me of that movie, They Live, where the whole quest through the movie is they're trying to knock out that signal that is keeping people in this state of consciousness because they're beaming this frequency over people.
And they're going to let us have it good if we just help them. They're going to leave us alone. Let us make some money.
Don't interfere. You can't win.
The Oscar winners give a press conference and how to buy a sailboat at... What's wrong?
Quit it. Filmmakers like George Romero and John Carpenter have to show some restraint. They're simply...
Again, with the predictive programming, because these things are in the sky. They are absolutely in the sky, several of them. And they have, again, with the Russian nested dolls, these programs, these black ops programs are nested. They don't spend this kind of money and only find one function for something. So there are all sorts of these devices up there above us used for cloaking, used for beaming frequencies at us. And yes, some of them are used as an actual sun simulator, believe it or not. And these, I put these pictures, this is a German scientist. This is the actual manufacturing in Germany of these enormous light sources. But let's get back to the webcam footage, and I will let Universal News Media or the Final Days channel, I will let her explain it to you because this is her specialty. And then afterwards, I'll come back and show you a ton of scientific evidence and patents and everything else to show you that this is absolutely true.
The images we are viewing were obtained over the past few days from the Federal Aviation weather cameras in Alaska and Canada. Each image is 10 minutes apart from the next, and they form a time-lapse video when strung together, such as the one playing now, taken from cameras in different locations throughout Alaska. The black dot in front of the sun is equipment that NASA launched hundreds, possibly thousands of miles from the Earth's surface. It casts a reflection upon the water, proving that it's not a camera or lighting issue, but it's an actual piece of equipment, and it's viewed from many different cameras. This black dot equipment is capable of producing an enormous glare, hundreds of miles in diameter, possibly thousands of miles. It always tracks in perfect synchronization with the sun. So essentially, the circular glare is always between Earth and the sun, but much closer to the Earth, of course. There is nothing special about this old video from Portage Glacier, Alaska, a year ago. The sun is seen passing behind a post. The importance of these frames is that we are looking at the real sun. Notice how the sun passes behind a post, and the post cannot hide the sun because the real sun is too large to be hidden behind a small post. I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. You'll see in a moment why this is important. Here's an interesting sign in the sky, viewed from the west-facing camera in Burwash, in the Yukon Territory. We see what looks like the sun, but it's not. As it passes behind a thin post, it completely disappears from view. The reason this is happening is because the light source we are viewing is the glare produced by the black dot equipment that reflects upon the water surface. Where's the real sun? It is currently behind a dark nebula that we will be looking at in just a minute. To refresh your memory on the approximate size of the real sun, here is an inset of the real sun we just saw moments ago in Portage Glacier. The real sun could never be hidden behind a thin flagpole. We see the same phenomena occurring in Drumheller, Alberta in Canada. The light source is seen traveling across the sky, and then it is completely hidden behind a tiny streetlight. Just to refresh your memory on the size of the sun again, here's an inset from Portage Glacier. The real sun could never disappear behind a streetlight. Now that you know how the manufactured light works, it will help you to understand the dark nebula we are viewing in this footage from the south-facing camera at Wapiskat, Ontario in Canada. Notice how bright everything is as the sun rises over on the left. Then suddenly the sun appears to shrink to 1/5 its size. That's because the real sun has just gone behind the dark nebula, and the manufactured glare is now in front of it. However, the artificial light is no match for the real sun because it almost looks like nighttime. Eventually, the real sun emerges from behind the nebula, and the landscape suddenly brightens, and the sun returns to its normal size again. Let's run through this again. The sun rises on the left. The landscape is bright. The sun suddenly shrinks to 1/5 its size, causing the landscape to darken as the real sun moves behind the dark nebula. The manufactured glare moves across the sky in front of the helium-4 dark nebula. Notice the amazing texture of the nebula as the light moves across it. It would be wonderful to be able to get a closer look at this structure. The light passes over the nebula, tracking in perfect synchronization with the sun. The landscape suddenly brightens as the real sun emerges from behind the nebula, and the sun resumes its normal size again. A total eclipse is occurring here, viewed from the southeast-facing weather camera located in Yugonic Bay, Alaska. As the manufactured glare approaches the two orbs, it illuminates them. Technology is in place to blur these objects. Some contrast helps to see these two celestial objects. We know these cannot be lens flares because the manufactured light is actually reacting to these objects. Notice how the glare reaches out toward the orb. These objects are between the sun and the earth. Thus, when this eclipse occurs, the manufactured circular glare stays in front of the celestial object while the real sun passes behind it, just like it did in the nebula we just saw a moment ago. This process successfully conceals a total eclipse. The enemies of Christ do not want you to know we are close to the end. They do not want you to turn your life over to Christ while there is still time. Information is at the end of this video that tells you how to turn your life over to Christ. The same thing is happening on the camera in Willow, Alaska. We know this cannot be a lens flare because the manufactured light once again reacts to it. Light can never react to a lens flare which is produced from within the camera. These are just more of the signs and wonders of the last days described by Jesus in the Bible.
And that's basically it in a nutshell. But despite all of their efforts to cover this thing up, I mean, you have to admit, trying to cover up the end of the world or the end of the age, that's a lot to bite off. But despite all of their efforts and the trillions of dollars in black budget, they still don't have a 100% perfect way of hiding what's going on. And that's why we do see the lens array or the fake sun, the sun simulator, slip out of synchronicity over certain nations. And we do see a couple of hours of darkness where that solar eclipse wasn't effectively masked by the glare of this thing in the sky, this sun simulator. And because of live streaming from all of this, CCTV cameras all over the world, it's just impossible to clean up every single tape that like this, where it slips through. And these things are visible. And no, this is not a lens flare, because you can see. Yes, there are tons of lens flares. I see them all over that people mistake for this type of thing. I'm not talking about that. But this stuff that is behind the clouds, a lens flare is inside the camera. It isn't out in the environment. So it won't react to the environment at all. It is inside the camera. So when you see things like this that are behind the clouds, no, that's not a lens flare. Or like this image where there's obviously two light sources and they're reflecting off of the water. So it's not in the camera, it's not a lens flare in the camera. There's something in the atmosphere, in the environment, and it's casting light on the water. So there's no shortage of nibiru coverage on the internet. You just have to be really discerning and honest with yourself. And you might want to hurry, because they're really sanitizing it. There's been a total news blackout since the 1980s. These were articles from the 1980s, and then there was a total news blackout. And now they've gone back and started sanitizing the internet and making all of the articles that were published on it and all of the videos that were published on it disappear. So you can see, if you go to any websites dealing with Planet X or Nibiru, most of their links won't work, because there's a constant algorithm going sanitizing the internet. And you can see from this website, it's like most of the links are gone. But I do highly recommend The Final Days, or Universal News Media, because she is called to do this and she keeps a close eye on it. And although I may not agree with her interpretation on every minute detail, I absolutely trust her, because her heart is right. Her heart is in Christ. The only place that her and I really might disagree would be that she says it's a dark nebula, which would mean it's primarily composed of gases and particulates. And I think it very well could be the black sun recorded in the ancient texts, the same black sun that the Nazis were obsessed with. Or maybe that's the same thing and we're just using different lingo. Or maybe it is a debris cloud, because I know tons of people have had dreams and visions from the Lord saying that they were shown that we were going to go through some sort of debris field, or some sort of debris was going to rain down on the earth with fireballs, meteors, all of that, like tons of them. Again, if you go to my channel, I've put together playlists from all of those people. These aren't my videos. These are all videos from their own channels, so you can find them. These are people from all ethnicities, from all different cultures, from all around the world, who are all being shown the same thing. This playlist is called Comets, Fireballs, Meteors, Asteroids Hitting Earth. And you can see these are videos from 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 9 years ago, that these brothers and sisters, well, the Lord has been warning us that this is coming for quite a while. And as far as that goes, the next playlist I have on there is 2 moons, 2 suns, multiple planets or comets, cosmic earth changes coming soon. And the same there. These are playlists I put together from people all over the world prophesying the same exact warning. And another common one is the 3 days of darkness, that tons of people say they have been shown that a dark cloud will come and cover the earth, blocking out the sun, and there will be 3 days of total darkness. So they seem to be describing something more akin to that black smoke monster. Do you remember that on the Lost TV show? That evil black smoke monster? Something like that, only enormous. But I wonder sometimes if some of our brothers and sisters who are being shown this coming event, if they have heard about the black sun or Nibiru or Planet X or any of that, because this is a perfect example. This brother here, he posts rapture dreams, simply terrifying. And he talks about something, this blackness coming over the earth, and he describes it as like someone moving a manhole cover over the entire earth, how the darkness slid over and then passed, and that there was also that sort of grinding sound of closing a manhole cover, only exponentially bigger. And that makes me think not only of the sky quakes or these, strange sounds, the trumpet sounds in the sky that people are talking about, the strange mechanical, metallic sort of rumblings that we're hearing suddenly, or we have been hearing for the last, decade, 5, 6 years, something like that. They're obviously related to what's going on here. But his prophetic dream also makes me think of the black sun passing. That's when he tells his dream, he doesn't mention it at all. It's like it never even occurred to him that it could be that type of event. In fact, he says rapture dream, and to me, there's nothing in it about the rapture at all. It's just about this darkness passing over. And I've seen that so often in all of our brothers and sisters sharing these dreams and visions. A lot of people don't have any frame of reference for what they've been shown. So they describe what they've been shown and they try to interpret it the best they can. But when I hear what they're saying in light of things like we're talking about here today, to me, it makes perfect sense. But I interpret it as this event that we're talking about right now. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to put anybody down or say, oh, I know more than them or anything like that. But I do want to point out that the things that the Lord shows us never fail. It's our own interpretation that fails. And I've done it a million times. Even in my first book, I misinterpreted a vision that I had because I didn't know what I was seeing at the time. So I tried to interpret it, according to what I understood and knew at the time. But in hindsight, now that the Lord has shown me so much more, I understand what I was seeing then, and I had misinterpreted it. And that's why we're out here every week, every month, trying to put this information out so that people can make sense of what the Lord is trying to tell us and warn us about. Anyway, all of that being said, let's take a listen to what he was shown, and you can decide if this sounds anything like the black sun or nebula passing over.
I don't know, the Lord, I guess, has been trying to talk to me for a long time, so here it is. The dream that I actually had lines up exactly what the Bible says about what's going to happen when he returns like a thief in the night. It's pretty much what happened. Anyways, the dream was short. And this is the last one I've had. I've had many, but this one specifically was terrifying. So, starts off, I'm in the house that I'm working at. I am a contractor, own a contracting company. Anyways, it's in the middle of the day. I'm standing in the master bedroom, and all of a sudden, the blinds are down, but I could see the light coming in. It starts to get darker. And what it sounds like is the loudest rumbling that you could ever imagine. Is so loud. It like vibrates to your very core and shakes you, or you can't even speak. It's so violent. It's like an earthquake in your body, but I'm sure it goes to the very core of the actual earth. But what it sounded like is you're in a sewer and someone is sliding the top over on top of you, and that's what it looked like, where the blinds weren't open, but I could see it getting darker and darker until it was almost pitch black. And then the noise stopped, and then all we heard was screaming at the top of people's lungs all the way around the house. People were screaming, so loud. It's terrifying. I wasn't even outside, and I was terrified. And then all of a sudden, light. But you couldn't even see in front of your face in the dark before the light came. I woke up so fast. I was so scared.
And that reminds me of the story in Exodus, where the darkness fell over all of Egypt at the same time as the plagues, like I showed in the beginning of this video. All of those events led up to a crescendo. And the Bible says in Exodus 10 that the 9th plague was this type of darkness. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven so that darkness will spread over the land of Egypt, a palpable darkness." So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and total darkness covered all the land of Egypt for 3 days. No one could see each other, and for 3 days no one left his place, yet all the Israelites had light in their dwellings. Which is especially interesting in light of that classified CIA document, which was actually an essay written by Chan Thomas and published in 1965. And it was called, of all things, The Adam and Eve Story, because it was a true account of world history. And that's exactly what it talked about, this recurring cataclysm. So when we hear terms like the Passover, what is it that is passing over? And if you've watched much of my channel, you know that I believe celestial objects are actually celestial beings, that they are intelligent life forms, not just objects. So I guess that's why it always pops in my mind about the smoke monster, because when it talks about this palpable darkness falling during Passover, right here it says, "For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you." So it's clearly talking about two entities at the same time. One is the Lord, who is protecting his people, and the other one is death, the destroyer, and he was allowed to smite the Egyptians. Another thing that the Bible recorded during Passover, that original Passover, when all of the plagues hit and then darkness fell for 3 days, then after they left, then there was the water receding. Remember, the Red Sea said that the waters receded and they went through on dry land, and then after they got through, then the waters came back. Well, this is an anomaly that we're seeing right now, leading up to this, as this object is above us. This is a video I put up about this time last year, April of 2018, called Missing Water and More Strange Lights in the Sky, Pole Shift, Planet X, Nibiru. This is more information pertaining to what I'm talking about right now. I don't know if this is on my main channel, but it is on my backup channel, The Supernatural God's Not Dead. But anyway, it shows several examples of this. It's happening all over the world for no reason, not related to rain or anything like that. The waters just disappear. People walk out and all of a sudden it's dry land. And no, of course, we are not talking about the tides. We all understand the tides. This is not the normal tides. This is just a new phenomenon that we're seeing all over the place. So the water just disappears, it's dry ground, and then it comes back. That picture was from Provincetown, Massachusetts. Same thing with Costa Rica and even Lake Michigan. It just disappeared, and then when it came back, look at this, it flooded all the way up, all on the roads. This had nothing to do with rains or anything like that. It disappeared, and then when it came back with a vengeance. Look at that. But anyway, I find that interesting because that was also recorded during the time of the Passover. That the Red Sea receded, they went through on dry ground, and then it came back. Okay, now showing that this is a cycle, then at the crucifixion of Christ, the same thing. And of course, we all know that he was crucified on Passover. That's why we call him the Lamb of God, and we plead the blood of Jesus Christ as what saves us. But also it talks about an unexpected eclipse that lasted 3 hours and all of the massive earthquakes and all of the other things we're talking about. Here it is. This is Luke 23, I believe. Yes, Luke 23, starting at verse 44. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. And when Jesus had cried out with a loud voice, he said, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. And at that very instant, when the Son of God gave up the ghost, there was a worldwide earthquake. Matthew 27:54. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Same account in Mark. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from the top to the bottom. And when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he had died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." And why did so many different eyewitnesses of these events taking place during this Passover say, surely this is the Son of God? Well, it wasn't just because of the worldwide earthquakes. It wasn't just because of the unexpected eclipse. It was because of the resurrections. When the power of God was present to raise the dead, Jesus Christ rose, and so did the saints. Matthew 27:52. The tombs broke open, and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. After Jesus' resurrection, when they had come out of the tombs, they entered the holy city and showed themselves to many people. And when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and said, truly, this was the Son of God. So please understand, when this event comes around, this thing that we are watching for, the return of Christ, the resurrection, the rapture, it's literal. He gave many examples, even raising Lazarus from the dead, it literally said in the Bible, Lazarus was stinking. His body was stinking. They didn't want to open the tomb because he had been dead so long, his body was stinking. And Jesus said, come forth. And he did. And life entered his body, and every cell was healed. His organs were healed. His blood was flowing. His brain was functioning. There is a higher power. There is a supreme being. And matter is at his command. Life, light, energy is at his command. And again, we know that's backed up by science. It's called cymatics or kymatics. And we have discovered that sound frequencies will move matter into geometric shapes. That when the Bible says that Christ is the Word of God and that everything that was created through him and by him, that's the truth. That's scientific. The Word of God, the sound of God, the sound frequency of God.
Created for us, the Chladni experiment. What we can see here is the metal sheet, this time connected to a sound driver and being fed by a frequency generator. And as the frequencies increase, so do the complexities of the patterns that appear on the plate, as you can see for your own eyes.
And of course, the same thing was proven with Dr. Emoto's water molecule experiment with spoken word. And you know, you can go on YouTube and find a million people who have done the rice experiment, the same thing. If you speak words, they have creative power or destructive power. And that can be proven by how the molecules organize when exposed to those sounds. When the Holy Bible says that in the beginning God spoke this world into existence, it means God spoke this world into existence. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So my point is, when the Bible says that Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, is the Word of God, that's nothing to be taken lightly. John 1:3, through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. Colossians 1:16, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. And that's exactly the type of thing that this declassified document, this Chan Thomas essay, the Adam and Eve story, talked about. He talks about the electrical and magnetic structure. It's the basic structure of the universe. The energy structure of an atom is identical to the structure of what we call a planet, which is exactly what I was talking about in those videos that I mentioned. And I wrote my book back in 2004, and this stuff wasn't declassified until 2013 and released to the public in 2016. So, I mean, this is amazing to me. He talks about an atomic reaction in the earth, as if the core of the earth would be the nucleus of an atom. He talks about the pole shift right here. In 1/4 to 1/2 a day, the poles move almost to the equator and all hell breaks loose. He describes what that would feel like from the surface of Earth when the crust is shifting, but then you have the oceans and the atmosphere not shifting at the same rate. So the oceans literally splash out of their basins like you see a pool during an earthquake. And that's what will cause these tsunamis that everybody is predicting on all the coastlines. And he goes on to say that this matches everything recorded in ancient history, that it was not mythology. He says, after this tumble, we joined Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, and goes on and on. So all the way back in the 1960s, he was talking about so much stuff that we all talk about. Look here. Greece was the home of the tall, blue-eyed, blonde race with standards of science and law unmatched to this day. So he was talking about the Nephilim races, the same tall, blue-eyed, blonde race that the Nazis were obsessed with and called the Aryan race, and that the UFO community now calls the Nordics. So back in the 1960s, when he was talking about everything we're talking about now, the CIA classified the document. And this is just a few eyedroppers of what they declassified. Well over 200 pages that we don't know what they said. But we can glean enough to know that it essentially says that something of biblical proportion is coming again. It mentions in the time of Noah, which is precisely what the Bible says. Luke 17:26, just as it was in the days of Noah, so also will it be in the days of the Son of Man. And it says that lots of places. It also says it in Matthew 24. Well, for all of their Bible banning, they sure seem to take that document pretty seriously. And as far as predictive programming about these unexpected eclipses, remember Little Shop of Horrors? The very first scene opens up with this guy holding a newspaper up where we can see the front page of it, and it says, unexpected total eclipse, end of the world.
When suddenly, and without warning, there was this total eclipse of the sun. It got very dark.
And I think that's why so many people got so excited around the time of the total solar eclipse over America, because there were so many prophetic dreams and visions referencing a total eclipse. So people were looking for a total solar eclipse. But I think what they were being shown by the Lord is this that we're talking about today, an unexpected total solar eclipse, because something is already eclipsing our sun. It's just being hidden from us. But they're not going to be able to hide it forever. In fact, I really don't think they're going to be able to hide it for very much longer at all, because people are starting to wake up and they're starting to make sense of what's going on in the world around us. Take this image, for example, right? You can look at this and say, hey, that's a solar eclipse. But you can see this same thing with a little sun simulator in front of it, and they'll say, oh, those are sun dogs. That's just sun dogs. Put your head down, get back to work, nothing to see here. I mean, you have to admit, if you look at these with new eyes, in light of what we just saw, how she explained this smaller light, the sun simulator, passes in front of the object, and our sun is going behind and being eclipsed by this object. And then you look at these images, these do look like a solar eclipse with a small light in front. And I think the reason why we have a mental disconnect and could never accept something like that is because of the size of this object. That there could never be something that big or that close. And this is pretty much the theory that Wrap the News YouTube channel, that he's been preaching for a long time. He's been showing these pictures like this, and he's like, can't you see it? It's right there. It's right there. But we have that normalcy bias. We have that cognitive dissonance. So most of us are like, oh, come on. But yeah, I think he's right. And again, I don't agree with Wrap the News on every single little detail that he says or anything like that. But we have to quit dismissing humans if they don't think exactly like us. If you're waiting for the perfect person, you'll never do anything. You'll never even start your race because there are no perfect people. And if you're waiting for somebody who thinks exactly like you, you're never going to find it because we're not designed that way. It's like fingerprints. We are all different on purpose so that it's all covered. God sees things from every angle. Conformity has never been the mission. Unity, all of us coming together as one body and doing our individual functions. That is the mission, not conformity. If you want to listen to somebody who is exactly like you, then just go stand in front of the mirror. Just go stand in front of the mirror and talk to yourself and save yourself the time. Otherwise, if you want to grow and learn, then you're going to have to listen to other humans that you don't agree with on everything. And as far as Wrap the News, he seems to be way ahead of the game on this one. Okay, so all that being said, let's jump into some of these cloaking technologies that they're using. And there's lots of different mechanisms at play here, but we'll just start with just basic cloaking. So one of the techniques used is just a typical invisibility cloak. We've had invisibility cloaking forever. I mean, this is really old and really simple technology. It sort of works on the concept of a green screen, and it broadcasts what is behind the cloak. And those are the types of technologies that we also hear a lot about with the UFO crafts, whether they're military projects or whether they are these nephilim technology crafts that people say, oh, I could see remember the Phoenix lights? All of the witnesses said when the craft went overhead, not the people who saw the lights that they said were flares way off, the people who saw a giant chevron craft go directly over their homes silently. They said they could see the stars through it.
And when it went directly overhead without a sound, it was like that. It was so big. And the right side of the V went over us. The left side was like a couple blocks over it.
You just didn't know what to do. My God, how big is this thing?
You could see right through the middle of it, but it was like looking through two-way glass, like through a mirage that you see on the highway or something, or just when it's real hot. There was no light coming back or anything like that. It was just really weird.
And over the decades, there's been many ways that they've experimented with creating these sort of cloaking screens and lens arrays. One of them, starting back in the 1990s, was a sort of mylar that they were saying, oh, these are weather balloons and things like that. But it's an unfurling thin aluminum plastic mirror. And I'll show you a lot more on that in just a second. But we all know the newest type of screen, if you will, that they are deploying all above us in our skies is this chemtrail, these chemtrails. This is what they're creating the screen with. And you can go online and find the articles and actually watch the Russian scientists at their own conferences speaking about this technology in their own words, about dispersing these chemicals as a screen. Now, we know, of course, chemtrails, like I said, nested projects have a lot of different functions. And that's why it's more than one chemical. They're spraying several different particulates at the same time. But there are one or two compounds that the Russian scientists mentioned by name that they used to project images in the sky. It's not just Americans who know about Project Bluebeam. And no matter how many times the CIA, YouTube, puts contrail at the bottom of our videos to put their propaganda right on top of us just talking and expressing our own life experience, we can see that these are grids. These are not contrails. They're being laid in grids. I suspect if somebody could take the time to chart where they lay the heavy grids day to day or month to month, that we could probably surmise the orbit of these objects. But anyway, my point is for the cloaking, that by positioning all of these different lens arrays at just the right locations, just like this, how they do holograms, you have to have the devices positioned in different positions to give this sort of a hologram that looks like it's real, right? It looks like it's right in the middle of the air. That looks like water is actually splashing up and it's just the gymnasium floor. So if you don't believe that they have the technology now, that it's not just cloaking in the sense of these mylar lens arrays, then you need to catch up with technology, because this isn't hocus pocus, religion, any of that. This is real. They can do this. And I can't show these for copyright because I tried to do it one time before and they took my video down, but these are some of the videos. Please go and look at them so you can see how realistic these holograms are. Hey, here's one of mine that actually stayed up. This was about Project Bluebeam and some of the apparitions that people are seeing. And this was a fashion show where she looked like a ghost. It was her hologram going down the runway. So that was interesting. So these holographic projections in the sky are, it's really happening. I know it's a lot to digest, but it absolutely is happening, and it looks so realistic. And that explains these anomalies that we see, like Crow 777. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. It has 1 million views, over 1 million views. But they took his channel down for a while, and he's nothing controversial other than he's a sky watcher, and he has his telescope set up, his camera set up, just watching, and he happened to catch the lines. And again, I don't agree with every single one of his assumptions. I'm actually working on a video, what the moon is really, that what he's saying is absolutely true, but there's a lot more to it also. I'm not going to show you the whole video because I would like to drive all the traffic over there for people to see it, but I am going to show you just a second or two because I want you to see what we're talking about, that there is evidence of holographic cloaking. And like I said, there's more to this. I don't believe that this whole moon is a hologram. I believe that they are cloaking something. See it? See it right there? And like I said, for all the debunkers, go on over there and watch his presentation because he talks about the equipment and how it's not in the equipment, and he explains all that. That's not my place. That's his specialty. My purpose for today is just to talk about the cloaking technologies that are active in our atmosphere above us. Not just right now, but they've been in place for years and years. You can see right here, he published this footage of the moon in 2013. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the hardware, some of the actual lenses and lens arrays and lighting systems and stuff involved with this. So of course, this is sort of the classic that is seen in the sky all the time. Tons of people get pictures of this. This is that hexagon, looks sort of like a solar panel, this type of thing. So people catch this all the time. And of course, I believe this is the one that has to do with the LED or the Li-Fi system that is being broadcast over us. But as far as this type of hardware being used for a cloaking device, this is really interesting. This is a dream or a night vision that just another Watchman 77 posted about a year ago. And look at he made this on the computer, and look at these hexagon shaped objects. But so you can see, this is exactly what people are seeing in the sky. And I watched his whole video. He seemed completely unaware that there were actually photographs of this type of technology in the sky. He's just talking about what he was shown. And he talks about them as some type of cloaking device, that there was a UFO above this. And of course, it could have been a military craft or whatever, but if you watch the whole thing through, and I'll put the link below so that you can in the description box, he talks about the Nephilim beings that actually came with these craft and how they could materialize through walls, just like alien abductees talk about. Except, like I've talked about in the last couple videos, like the Paradise Lost series, and then with the Aryan race and the Nordics and all of that, that they were human looking, the ones he's talking about in here. And coincidence of all coincidences, he talks about at the same time seeing this enormous planet on the horizon. So I find that so fascinating that almost everything we're talking about right here, right now in this video, technologically, he was shown over a year ago in a vision. But he was shown what's coming. And I think we should take heed. I know a lot of people still don't put a lot of merit in dreams and visions, but like I've tried to convey so many times in my other videos, that they have not told us what the dream state really is. They know what delta brain waves are because they have a D-wave quantum computer accessing other dimensions. called the D wave after delta waves. The Montauk Project, the antenna that they used for quote unquote time travel, was a delta T antenna. So they understand these brain waves. And so that's what I was getting to with the Schumann resonance, that the Schumann resonance spiking up, the actual frequency of the earth raising to where it is not associated with alpha brainwave state anymore. And once you realize how all of this fits together, then you can understand these Bible verses that, like Acts 2. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. The same thing in the Old Testament in Joel 2. And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. So this frequency change that we're seeing and this sudden outpouring of dreams and visions because of our brain waves, religiously and scientifically, this is happening, whether you can cope with it or not. It's very real. So anyway, I'm going to play you a clip of our brother's dream, and I hope you can receive it. If not, take it or leave it.
In my dream, it was night, and I was in the suburbs. It really reminded me of close to home here northwest of Chicago. So I'm on a front yard, and as I looked down to my right, I could see these hexagonal discs flying in the sky, and I made a picture really quick. I'll turn the camera around. I don't know if you can see that, but they're all flying in the sky, and they're in formation, and they went back as far as I could see, and they were flying very slow, very much like a parade. Maybe you could think of the Romans after they conquered. They'd come back to Rome in a big procession, kind of like a victory parade. So these discs were moving very, very slow and methodically, and I just felt like we're being invaded. It was like an invasionary force, superior technology, and I'm just speechless. I'm kind of running. I'm reaching for my phone. I want to start recording this so I can put a video on YouTube, and so I held my camera up, and I'm zooming in to get a real nice view of one of those. And the further I zoomed in, I went past those hexagon lights, and it was like they were like a cloaking device. Because when I got through those discs, I could see the bottom of ships, or at least I was looking at one of them, so it was the bottom of a ship, and it had lights on it, going with the lines of the vessel's shape. So I only saw like the bottom of the hull, but it was clearly a ship. And I was scared, and then I turn around and looking down the other end of the street, and then right in front of me, this gigantic planet taking up almost the entire view, horizon to, east to west. I had to look up really far. It was absolutely massive, and I could see land masses on it, water bodies, and as I'm looking at the planet, then all of a sudden the whole planet just drops out of the sky and vanishes beneath the horizon, almost like a cartoon. And then I turn around, and all of a sudden I see like plasma weapons, lasers being fired from those column of ships, and they're hitting the buildings on the street. So I run off the street and I go.
I know some of you are really bummed that I cut that off right there, but like I said, the link will be below if you want to go and watch his whole entire testimony. But for the sake of this video, I've got to get going. And from what he says, this cloaking technology, these things we're seeing in the sky, might not even be man-made. It sounds like they could be nephilim technologies, and that they're not satellites that we've launched into space or anything, but they are intelligently controlled craft, or they're on the bottom of intelligently controlled craft, or who knows, they could be drones, I don't know. But yeah, he makes it sound like, and then when he says these ships, though, after these ships start attacking people and stuff, then the entities. But of course, we know that the kings of the earth, if you will, the Illuminati kingpins, are in a peace treaty with these Nephilim races. So I guess it could be man-made, back engineered from the technology that they gave in the swap for humans. And it makes me wonder, since he said all of these craft were then in formation coming over the city, and then the enormous planet was visible on the horizon, it makes you wonder if these are the same things that are stationed all around that, cloaking it right now. And when they come down, it'll be a simultaneous thing. We'll see it because these are the exact craft that have been hiding it. But there's no doubt that these things that he saw in his dream, people are seeing in real life in the skies. That much we know for sure. And there are just limitless images of this being caught in the sky, because people don't always even see it with their naked eye. They're taking pictures of something else, like a rainbow effect. And then when they look at the pictures, they see it and they can blow it up and see it clearly. So maybe it's that the camera picks up a range of light that our optical nerves are not picking up. But there's no denying that it's there, and it is a sort of man-made object. This is not something natural that people are seeing in the sky. And most people tend to agree that this is the type of technology that is the sun simulator, is the actual fake sun that tracks along with the sun, that puts off this glare. Because so many times you can see this signature of LED lights, this petal light pattern, that's a signature for LED light. So when you're looking at the sun and you're constantly capturing this petal light pattern, you know, that's evidence. And you can see here, there are other lenses in place. I don't necessarily think everything you see that is round is one of these planets, and I'll show you why. This is one of those round objects that has been caught in photos right next to the sun. And they nicknamed it the Stargate over there at Mr. MBB 333's channel, link below, because it looks so much like the Stargate from the movies. But you can go over there to his channel and see the original and how he runs it through all the filters to bring it out so you can see it more clearly and all of that. And you can make up your own mind. In my opinion, this is one of those lenses, one of the lenses that I've been talking about, which is another type of cloaking. And notice this, by bending light with these magnifying glass arrays, you can not only make the object invisible, like you can see here, they have their hand behind it and it's completely invisible, but they bend the light around and you'll be able to see what is happening behind the object that is being hidden. So look at this. Here they just do the same thing with a spoon. So not only does this technology exist, but they've created ways of doing it in tiny, tiny forms and in massive, deployable into our atmosphere forms. This is reality. This isn't conspiracy. This is the world we live in. So when we see images like this pop up, and it only pops up, you know, it's gone by the timestamp of 8:32, that could easily be explained by how these lens arrays work. Because they say if the object moves outside of 15 degrees outside of that center, then it can be visible. Then the cloaking device doesn't work perfectly. And this, looking at these are lens flares. This is what this is, obscuring something dark here. So let's go back to at least 1993 and look at some of the designs that Russia released about this unfurling mirror that they could launch into space. Talk about smoke and mirrors. I mean, this is literally smoke and mirrors. Chemtrails everywhere, smoking up the sky, and then Russians launching these mirrors to create this lens array. Unfurling a thin aluminum and plastic mirror in space, Russian scientists and engineers for the first time have sent a narrow beam of reflected sunlight flashing across the darkened side of the Earth. So it's not just creating the illusion or the cloaking, but they're saying right here that these could also be used to beam light down on the Earth, which could explain a lot of these phenomena that people are reporting all over. They say, I go outside and the sun just burns my skin. I can't even mow my yard. It's not like it used to be. And these melting signs. One guy went out cycling and his helmet melted just while he was out cycling in the morning. I mean, that sounds like either microwaves or this type of thing that I talk about in here is what happens when you put a magnifying glass, sun through a magnifying glass? It starts a fire. So if Russia or the other nations or, you know, the deep state conglomerate have deployed this lens system of magnifying glasses and mirrors and stuff into our atmosphere, that could account for some of this burning on people's skin and why the sun looks different to everybody now. And honestly, it could even account for a lot of the wildfires. And again, that's not to discount the fact that there is a high-tech war going on with directed energy weapons and that type of thing. But think about this. This is NASA's map, of course. NASA says the wildfires are a symptom of climate change. So we have this same deceptive agency that is covering up and is deploying this technology, the smoke and mirrors and magnifying glasses over us. And then when everything starts catching fire, then they say, oh, well, that's a symptom of climate change. It's just unbelievable. And we can see them adjusting and turning the lenses behind the clouds. Like, look at this. You'll see this beam. They call it a crown flash phenomenon. They actually say that. So when you say, look at this strange light in the sky, this is this. They go, oh, no, that's a crown flash. Well, what is a crown flash? Well, nobody really knows. Well, what causes a crown flash? Well, you know, it's a phenomenon. Well, then you don't know what it is. So just because you put a name on it doesn't mean that I don't get to discuss it. No, this is the lens array. This is them adjusting the lens array. They call it a crown flash. It's not just natural dancing lights. People see it all the time. I mean, you know, it's rare. It is rare that people see it. So, and I don't mean all the time, but I mean, there's tons of footage of it. And they just say, oh yeah, that's that phenomenon. I always say there are no mysteries, there are no anomalies. Those are just words that people use because they refuse to believe the truth. Here's another one that you'll see right in here. It's not quite as pronounced as that last one, but you can see it. Plus the glowing cloud phenomenon is another one. Clouds that are, there's a light source behind them, clearly a light source behind them. Just, I'm not going to show all those images. You can look them up. They're everywhere. Mystery lights coming from behind the clouds, but it's no mystery. And who's deploying all of this equipment? Everybody. It looks like everybody. Here's a video that I did back the end of 2017. when people started noticing these strange SpaceX launches with this light inside. And when cornered about it, they would just say, oh, it was a success. The mission was a success. We delivered the payload. But they would never say what the payload was or anything like that. But in this video here, I point out that in this particular instance, the very same day that we here in America were all focused on what SpaceX was doing, the same thing was happening in a lot of countries. Russia launched, I think China launched. I can't remember all the details, but all of the names of them and even footage of the launches are all in this video. So yeah, they're all in on it. That's why all of this quote unquote space agencies of all the nations essentially have the same logo with the chevron here, like NASA. They all have it. They have the same logo because they're all part of the same cabal. Every single one of them. It's unbelievable. But like I showed, but we know it's true because look at the Antarctic Treaty that I talked about and showed in that series, in the Antarctica series, that all of these nations, although they appear to us as enemies, players on the stage, like they're enemies of one another, they can't agree on anything, but yet they can on this. They can all agree on this. And we see the same thing with the space agencies. They all seem to agree when it comes to what they are telling us is space. And I have absolutely no doubt that this equipment is real and that it is picking up readings from our atmosphere. I just don't believe it is aimed where they say it is aimed. So here's some SETI footage that has made the rounds all over the UFO community. You can see right here. Let me scoot this up. A UFO is seen on SETI. So is this a UFO? Let's take a look. Right here in between these brackets, this is the object in question. See it moving and see that unfurling? That canopy looking thing? And this over here, where you're seeing these bursts of energy, this would be where the sun is at. It's a close up. So, right, it looks like a round object and something unfurling. Okay, here's another capture, and you'll see it open even wider in this capture. Okay, here we go. Now this is what I'm talking about. See it start to unfurl? Now look at the design of this Russian mirror lens array, unfurling a thin aluminum and plastic mirror in space. Okay, look at the design. This is from 1993. You have this round thing, right, that looks like a UFO round thing. It's got like a circle in a circle, and then it opens up in the front, and that's the mirror. See? I mean, to me, that looks like exactly what SETI's picking up, moving toward this planet in the direction of the sun, deploying these lens arrays, these mirrors. So don't get me wrong, I'm not mocking the UFO community because they think this is a UFO. They don't know. Many of them have no idea. They haven't researched old newspaper articles about unfurling mirrors from Russia in the 1990s. And honestly, like I always say, I thank them for their work. Even though we disagree about what this object is, I thank them for their work, that they spend time watching these cameras, watching the feeds, getting the screen captures, all of the hard work that they put into research and investigating this. But yeah, on this one, in my humble opinion, this is clearly what SpaceX and the Russian agencies and all of these agencies working together are deploying. It's part of this cloaking system. It's part of a lens array. So, oh my goodness, it's a mess up there. And that's why we're seeing all of these strange things that we've never seen before, like triangle clouds, or perfectly square or perfectly rectangle clouds. Oh, come on. This isn't my first day on Earth. I've been here my whole life. And clouds do not form in triangles and squares. Well, I mean, they do now. straight geometric lines. And then, of course, we have the phenomenon of the hole punch cloud, where a perfect circle, it looks like a perfect circle, something that's invisible to us, passes through a cloud front, passes through cloud cover, and displaces it and sort of drags it along. But of course, they just tell us, well, it's a hole punch cloud, and so all of that condensation just falls in a perfect circle suddenly. Okay, whatever helps you cope. But I'm just asking you to consider that a hole punch cloud is caused by something, I don't know, punching a hole in the clouds. Then we also have all of the dark rays, the dark shadows, the perfect straight lines cutting the sky in half where it's light on one side and dark on the other. And these black shadow looking rays, as well as clouds casting shadows on what should be empty space. I mean, a cloud shouldn't be able to cast a shadow on empty space. Not to mention the light source, the sun, should be above the clouds, casting the shadow down on the earth. But this is what we're seeing, and you can see this shadow isn't cast by this chemtrail because it extends way up here where the plane hasn't even gotten to yet. But lately, they always seem to be associated. If you see one of these dark rays, then boom, there's a chemtrail plane on it trying to cover it up. And this is a picture that I took right out in front of my house, and the same thing, a striking dark ray. And here come the chemtrail planes right on the line trying to cover it up. I wish it would have shown up better. I just used my phone and tried to get a picture of it, but in real life, it was really striking. And this is weird. I had no idea that there was a black sheriff's car sitting across the road from my house when I was taking these pictures because I was looking up in the sky. So that's odd. Here's a picture that the Boogeyman took, the Boogeyman channel right here, about the holographic sky. All he was actually trying to do was to get pictures of the Nibiru system. And he talks a lot and does a lot of videos and captures of this lens array. He captures the actual lenses. Again, links will be below. But while he was filming, he clicked it over to infrared, and this is what showed up. Some sort of structure behind the clouds, which reminds me of what everybody's talking about with the nanotubes. So, is this the screen? Is this the lens? I don't know. He talks about it like he thinks it might be the firmament. Who knows? Maybe it is like the Hunger Games, especially if the Nephilim races, the ancient ones, are involved. Who knows how big the deception is? Who knows what's real and what isn't in the sky? But I don't know. This could be the actual texture of one of the unfurled lenses. I don't know, but it's a great capture. And again, with the frequency ranges, that's really common for people to capture things in the infrared spectrums. In fact, there's one scientist who inverted a telescope with the lens system in the telescope and created a device that picks up entities moving around. Not even mechanical crafts, but entities in the infrared spectrum moving around in the atmosphere. In fact, his diagrams about changing the shape of the lens remind me a lot of the difference in lens shape and the light refraction that we see when people have an astigmatism. And that just happens to be one of the traits that is super common in Rh negative people. I have astigmatisms in both eyes. And over the years, there's no doubt I've come to realize that I do see the world differently. But that's a topic for another video. The Rh negative video will be going up right after this series. So let's keep moving on and listen to what the Boogeyman had to say about this footage.
I was shooting on RAW, and when I added an infrared filter to these, the blue of the sky just fell away. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. What it looks to me is like a hologram type system, maybe metal in nature. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what it's made out of. I'm not sure who put it up there or when it went up there, but All I know is I really want you guys to pause this and take a look at what I'm showing you here.
When you have a fake sky that is full of holograms and full of cloaking devices and full of enormous objects that cast their own shadows and give their own light and all of that as well, it's quite a job to cover it all up, and they just can't. And we see that. We see the evidence of it slipping through all around us. It's getting to the point that they can't cover it up anymore. Even the electromagnetic anomalies can't be hidden by doctoring instruments anymore because you can see it with the naked eye. We've got the aurora borealis everywhere. It's not at the magnetic poles anymore. It is everywhere. Here it was just last week over New York. We've had it over Michigan, over lots of other nations. And we have plasma discharges blowing out transformers everywhere. Not just in New York, but in Ohio, there's several of them. I have a file going on it. But yeah, it's happening everywhere. Plasma discharges. The sky is lighting up. And it's only going to increase as we approach the event horizon. Marfugel's done a pretty good series on that and on the megaquake that's coming. But he talks about and shows the footage that everybody's been reporting of these convoys carrying just truckloads of transformers. They're stockpiling transformers like they know, like what happened in New York, they know that this is going to start blowing out the electrical grid. They know it and they're preparing for it. And these are military convoys that people are seeing driving by with these truckloads of transformers. These aren't just like civilian companies delivering their load. These are military convoys. And lots of other people in other cities are saying that they see the spare transformers sitting out in their cities. Like they've already been delivered. But anyway, yeah, Marfugel on the earthquake preparedness, he talks a lot about that. And he talks about how 27 states are preparing for whatever this is. I mean, obviously, everybody's preparing for it. But he can document and cite some shocking stuff from these 27 states and documents that they've released, that they'll say they're ordering all these supplies and doing all of these things to prepare for this Cascadia quake, you know, which is way over on the West Coast, and 27 states are preparing for this catastrophe. So clearly they know it's coming. We're the only ones who don't know it's coming. I mean, we know, but most people don't. And it's not just America preparing. Like I showed you in the last couple videos, Russia and China, Germany, all of these other nations are doing drills as well. Russia doing drills evacuating 40 million people into underground bunkers. I mean, this is what they're talking about with the phoenix rising from the ashes, or what do they say? Order out of chaos. This is the New World Order or the Antichrist regime. This is how they take total control. It will be on the heels of these catastrophes. And I've seen it. One of the prophetic dreams that God gave me, I saw exactly that. I saw a military invasion that directly followed an earthquake, and we were totally caught off guard. We thought they were coming to help. Like, we saw the convoys coming down the road, and we weren't scared at all. We're like, oh yeah, they're coming to help. And they opened fire. It was like, what? So for example, this time they've got everything in order. They've got their underground bunkers. They've got their refugee camps. They've got their ability to chip people so they can do the census and track everybody and know who survived and who didn't. There won't be an economy anymore, and paper money will be absolutely useless. So that'll also be the mark of the beast system that the Bible says nobody could buy or sell unless they had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of its name. So that will be the new digital economy, which is part of the total tyranny of the Antichrist system. And you can see the beta tests going on over in China right now with their social credit scores and their dystopian nightmare with all of their facial recognition software, a totalitarian surveillance society. And like I've addressed in several of the video series over the last couple of months especially, they have mad scientists doing crazy stuff. They're genetically engineering bodies, they're cloning bodies, they're brain mapping and trying to save their identity like something straight out of a Transcendence movie. You know, through these technologies, they're soul transferring. They have a sort of artificial reincarnation system they've developed. I mean, there's some crazy stuff going on, all in an effort to maintain this control. but it comes to an end. That's what the Bible says. There is an end. Yes, this has been the cycle since the creation of this world, because this matrix was put in place for the sifting, for the division, to redeem all of the redeemable and to sift out this and quarantine it in a dimension called hell. And God says there is an end to these cycles. There is a judgment day where it will be final, where the sorting and the sifting will be done, and it will be divided into heaven and to hell. So simultaneously, some souls are rising and others are falling. There are fallen angels and rising souls at the same time. Joel 2:31, the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It's going to be great for some of us. We're looking forward to going home. We're looking forward to a dimension with no evil. We don't love sin. We hate sin. So it's going to be a great day for us, but it's going to be a dreadful day for some who love their sin more than they love God. Revelation 6:15 through 17. Then the kings of the earth, that's the powers that be, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in the caves among the rocks of the mountains. They called to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb, for that great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it? So just like during the original Passover, at the same time the destroyer is coming, the same time this system, this object, this being is coming, at the same time the destroyer is coming, the Lord is coming too. God will protect his people, and the destroyer will be allowed to perform the wrath of God. And what are the signs of this time that we should be looking for? Said there will be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Are we not seeing that right now in the era that we are living in? This is happening now. It is not hidden anymore. NBC announces new moon phases because everybody's like, okay, this is impossible. Why is the moon in the wrong direction? And so they're like, oh yeah, well, these are actually the moon phases. And they've done the same thing with the zodiac over the last couple of years. You know, it used to be the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 houses, just like the 12 apostles, the 12 patriarchs. The celestial mechanics is fashioned in that way. But now they're telling us there's actually 13. Oh, that's not an occult number. No, now there's 13 zodiac signs.
Not hanging upside down. So, you know, I notice it too. I've been noticing it for a while. Can't really fully explain it either. And it's out there receiving sunlight independently. I don't know what would make it appear upside down. It should be vertical, you know, like the light that hits the earth. You know, the light's not upside down. Otherwise, we'd have, if it was like that, we would have daylight across the equator. That would be the termination line. The termination line would be across the equator, and the bottom half of the earth would be illuminated, and the top half of the earth would be in darkness. So that's why we know that the termination line, light and dark from the sun going across the earth, that line is vertical. And so should the moon be. I agree. Why it appears like this to us, it's kind of puzzling.
And I'm going to start out with just something that's just humorous to me. I mean, this just makes me laugh. It makes me cringe, and it makes me laugh. And that is the, you know, there is a voluminous amount of information available on moon phases, okay? And you can just go look on the internet, look at moon phases, look at images, and you can find this stuff very easily, right? So, you know, as all my life has been, the way that I've always been taught about the moon is that you have a waxing moon and a waning moon. So this is waxing. In other words, it's increasing and increasing over time throughout the month. And then it goes to a full moon, and then it wanes. That is, the moon the light starts to go less and less and less until the moon is invisible again, right? And you would be able to time everything by this. I mean, it was like a Swiss watch. right? And it was, you know, you might tilt a little bit one way or the other, depending on your delineation on the earth. But for the most part, that was what I grew up with. And I'm 50, almost 55 years old, and all the old timers would agree with me. So my question is, why are they trying to convince, and this is where it just gets ridiculous, why are they trying to convince the world that these are the proper moon phases? Okay, this is an article from NBC. And then it talks, and then it basically shows this picture to almost like to say, like, this is the normal moon phases. So if you're younger, like if you're 18 or younger, you may have never really even noticed the moon, and so you wouldn't even know better. But us old timers, we know, man. We know that the moon's not supposed to do that. And of course, when we look at our skies, this is exactly what we're seeing in our skies during the different moon phases. So it is accurate. That's what we're seeing right now. But it's different than when we grew up. And that's one of the things we point out at WSO, is that there's a lot of changes going on around us and in our solar system. And one of them is that the moon tilts. And we get a lot of grief for that. But again, guys, it's humorous. It's humorous, even getting to the point where they're trying to tell people about delineation and all kinds of crazy stuff. So
turns out a lot has changed and a new day is dawning. Harris poll, but get this, the Minnesota Planetarium Society says, hold the phone. The star constellations above us no longer are in the same alignment that they once were, which means that many of our signs are now different than we think. And here are the changes. I think we have so if you look on the screen there, this was the old zodiac. You probably know what you were. Now there's the new zodiac. So you may have shifted a little bit, and you'll notice there's an extra sign.
And this is precisely what the Bible says will happen before the return of Christ. And we're seeing it in our lifetime. Luke 21:25, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations, bewildered by the roaring of the sea and the surging of the waves. Men's heart will fail them for fear over what is coming upon the earth, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now that's some serious stuff. That's not signs in the sun and moon and stars like, oh, look, it's the moon's perihelion. It looks so big. That's a sign. No, this is talking about signs in the sun and the moon and the stars that will cause people to have heart attacks. Men will faint from fear over what is coming upon the earth. That's not just a pretty blood moon we're talking about here. I believe what this is talking about is what we just spent 2 hours talking about.